Naive 20-year-old me used to think of charities, of nonprofit organizations, as truly selfless acts. But you probably know where this is going. FIFA, a non-profit organization founded to develop and to improve the beautiful sport of soccer, has $1.8 billion in cash reserves, paid its president about $3 million a year in salary. Its top executives went all to jail a few years ago for laundering money and taking bribes. This pastor, for example, he used his non-profit to essentially become a millionaire and then fly in his own private jets.
Jesus was physically on the earth today, he wouldn't be riding a donkey. He'd be in an airplane preaching the gospel all over the world.
And these are just two of so many stories we found on how easy these organizations lose their way. And it's no coincidence that so many celebrities and millionaires have all established their own foundations. But even worse than this, even worse than just saving taxes, nonprofits raise money. They raise money from people like you and me who want to help sometimes, but few people know the truth of where that money sometimes ends and how little it actually goes to that cause that you think that you're supporting. So what is it about the nonprofit organization that makes it the perfect cover-up for this crap?
Stealing tens of millions of tax dollars meant for child nutrition programs.
The nonprofit took over $300,000 in federal funds to just shy of $200 million in 2021 alone.
So when you start a normal company, you incorporate it, you define a set of shareholders, you issue more shares to investors, and then if things work out, you sell it, and then you retire in Costa Rica. When a traditional company closes a profitable year, it may choose to save that money for later, or it may pay it out to its investors as dividends. The way this works, at least in the US, is first, the IRS will take its cut of the company profits. That's revenue minus expenses. Then, if the investors agree, they make a dividend distribution. So all the profits are divided between all the shares that have been issued for that company, and each shareholder gets some cash proportional to their share ownership, which is taxed again, by the way. But still, this is the most direct, legal, straightforward way to earn money from the company that you started or from your investments. But it is expensive because it is double taxed. So there must be another way, right? Well, of course, there are plenty of ways. People will always find ways to get fewer taxes. Go watch our video on the Pandora Papers. But nonprofits are just one of them. And if you know your way around the system, you can absolutely use them to your advantage. So if you're opening a nonprofit organization, there isn't much difference with a for-profit at first. You have to do some basic things like defining a name, creating a governing board, define a mission statement, all those bureaucratic details. Then you have to incorporate it and register just like a normal business. You have to file for this tax-exempt status. If you get this approved, then you're all set. But the authorities are going to be on top of you. Nonprofits can make revenue, yes, they can pay for things, they can employ people, and yes, they can have some additional regulations. For example, they have to file yearly forms to justify their income and their expenses. And with these forms, authorities sort of try and control that there isn't any foul play. But, of course, if you play your cards right, you can end up with an organization that you control, maybe through somebody else that just does what you tell them to do, and an untaxed bucket of money. And you can use that cash for things like jets. So this is Jesse Duplantis. He's a pastor. I'm sure his church does great things for a lot of people. I don't doubt it. But personally, I just don't trust the guy. So why would you? It's not the weird hair or the creepy smile. It's that he uses his churches and his nonprofits to buy jets. He asked members of the congregation to give him $54 million to pay for a private jet. Why, you ask? Well, because flying coach is full of demons.
It's not about possessions, it's about priorities.
He has said that flying commercial would require him to stop repeatedly, waste a lot of fuel, and slow down his job as a pastor, and that the tiny seats and crappy food wouldn't let him talk to God. And here's where it gets all more twisted. He asked for a donation, true donation of $54 million to do that. And you see, the ministry can say that it is an asset. It is an asset that the pastor uses to spread the word of God, which is the non-profit's purpose. So as far as the law goes, it's still fair play, even if it's a private freaking jet. Oh, and by the way, that was his fourth private jet.
This was paid cash. This was paid cash. This was paid cash, and the new one's going to be paid cash also.
So when the media questioned him, this is what he said. I can't even read this. "I'm not asking you to pay for my plane. I'm asking you to pray for my plane." That's the actual quote.
God told me to have that plane.
And then in the context of a nonprofit, there's nothing stopping him from doing that. So this crazy bastard is just one example of how nonprofits can play with the numbers. After all, the expenses tab in your financial model, wink, can hold up anything. After all, there doesn't seem to be much control when it comes to conflict of interest with these foundations. Now, we've all heard, of course, of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This nonprofit is famous for donating to the latest and to the greatest education, medicine, and research. From the outside, if you're not part of QAnon, it seems that everybody loves it, right? After all, they have, and this is true, they have donated billions of dollars into global health with the latest technology on hand. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt the video, but I wanted to talk about our sponsor for today, which is TurnMogul. So for any business, tracking your metrics, your KPIs is vital. If you don't do it, you might run into trouble, as we have. But what has saved us through all these years has been the data that we get from TurnMogul. We generate revenue from a lot of sources, from this YouTube channel, from our consulting, from SaaS, and we consolidate all of that into their platform. And for the SaaS part, which is their bread and butter, you can run cohort tables, you can run lifetime value reports, and you can even filter customers by tags and see how the behavior of these metrics, lifetime value or churn, varies by customer segment. So for companies under $10,000 in MRR, TurnMogul is free, and you can use it by signing up at turnmogul.com/Slidebean. If you're over 10K in MRR, you can still write off $600 of your first year if you use the code Slidebean. Back to the video.
Bill Gates and his wife Melinda have been using their influence and wealth to advance healthcare around the world.
This foundation hovers on a very thin line between right and wrong. So here's how it goes. Like in 2020, the Gates Foundation donated around $250 million in grants to giant corporations, LG, or Ericsson, Merck, and Pfizer. So sure, these companies are making great strides in topics like the vaccine, like the COVID vaccine, and a bunch of new technologies. But at the same time, the Gates Foundation owns stock in all of these corporations. Now, is that forbidden? No, but it can absolutely blur the lines and make corporations believe that they too, even with their massive size, are worthy of billions of dollars in donations. Now, donations are essential for nonprofits, but this gets a lot darker. It gets a lot darker when these organizations are not only the cash reserve for their owner, but do the fundraisers as well. Yeah, let's take another controversial nonprofit. I'm gonna get burned for this, but okay, so let's talk about the NRA. NRA history spans 150 years, and its core goal has evolved through it all. First, it aimed to improve marksmanship, and then shifted to promoting gun education and gun safety, and then lobbying for guns rights. But in later years, the NRA became desperate for donations. It has deficits of up to $40 million, so it's increased its fundraising like crazy. But hold on. The NRA is this huge organization. How did it get to this point? This all started when the NRA decided to change its focus from education to lobbying. They started promoting this gun-loving lifestyle and openly criticized those who criticized the organization. In fact, it stopped funding gun safety. The nonprofit's budget showed that it had reduced that to less than 10% of its budget for gun education and for safety, and that it had shifted the rest to just communications. It was now this media company that had become a piggy bank for its directors. Corruption within the NRA was so rampant that Wayne LaPierre, one executive, paid $13.5 million of the nonprofit's money to a travel consultant. What the hell is a travel consultant? LaPierre also spent almost $300,000 in a Beverly Hills men's store, $250,000 in travel to Italy, Hungary, and the Bahamas. One NRA member, Dave Butts, received $400,000 as payment for consulting on public outreach. And then the NRA lobbied against background checks for gun owners and even spent $1.6 million in 6 months campaigning against it. And that is a major no-no. Nonprofits can lobby, but it cannot become a substantial portion of their efforts. So all these chaos finally sparked some legal action. So in 2020, New York's Attorney General Letitia James opened a full-on investigation and alleged that the NRA had failed to continue its core goal of promoting gun safety.
For years of self-dealing and illegal conduct that violate New York's charities law and undermine its own mission.
And plus, of course, there was all this corruption stuff. And Washington, D.C. followed suit. The accusations were very explicit. that the NRA was just too corrupt. It was no longer focused on its goals, instead, again, just a piggy bank for its directors. But that is kind of the problem with nonprofits. It's easy to justify and hard and complex to disprove. The NRA could say all of these expenses were necessary, and we kind of would have to believe them in the current state of the law. Well, okay, so let's maybe assume that not all the money is laundering. Let's go to a different world. Let's assume that someone really wants to help pick plastic from the ocean, or, I don't know, help the pandas. So another massive problem with nonprofits, it's how much money gets lost on the way. Okay, so let's say that you donate $100 to a campaign in Omaze. 65 of those dollars will be used to pay for the reward and for the costs of the reward, just that. $20 are for Omaze's admin fees, and they're a for-profit organization, by the way. And after all of these fees, only $15 out of your $100 donation will make it to the actual nonprofit, which of course, most certainly has costs as well. So if you really care about donations, all you're left with is doing research. So you have sites like Charity Navigator that can tell you how much a nonprofit pays in overhead expenses. If you want to help that panda, you should respect that 33% rule. This means that any nonprofit that spends more than 33% should raise a red flag to you. And the problem is that there are a lot of them that don't work as efficiently. So that panda might get either $87 or a meager $20, and in some cases it's even worse. If you heard about the Cancer Fund of America, you might think that this is a professional, solid organization that helps fund cancer research, right? If you go to their website, that's what they'll tell you. And then if you look at their financials, you'd see that they, in fact, donate to cancer research, but that's after they pay James Reynolds, the founder, $230,000 a year. The fund also pays for another 24 family members' salaries. And you might think that such a high salary means that there's probably a lot of money coming in, right? And you have to manage it. Well, no, not really. The Cancer Fund of America donates 2.5% of all donations to research and support. 2.5% of all the money that they get. But once again, as a nonprofit organization, they can't. This is legal and there's nothing that can stop them. So that's why we need to have sites to rate these charities. And that's why the Cancer Fund of America has the worst possible rating in Charitable Watch since 1993. At least they've been consistent. Before we finish, I want to talk about one last case in particular. It brings all of these loopholes together into one single thing. Plus it deals with one of my passions, I suppose, which is football. Soccer for you Americans.
Major sponsors should reconsider supporting FIFA, now a byword for global corruption. Big money FIFA World Cup spenders speak to the world like they're in a parallel universe.
Here we go, Seth.
Whenever I'm watching the World Cup or even the qualifiers, I just forget that FIFA is a nonprofit, because this massive organization that sells massive TV deals and shapes the entire country before a World Cup is a nonprofit, just like that charity on the corner of your street. But again, what is the purpose? What is the mission of FIFA? Well, to take the sport of football to all corners of the world while making it better. And yes, I think that they have. After all, more and more people watch the World Cup now more than ever. FIFA has become a giant money machine by selling licensing and broadcasting rights plus ticket sales from the actual World Cup. So in 2018, FIFA had $4.5 billion in revenue, and this is a World Cup year. This is the Russia World Cup year. But in a non-World Cup year, they still managed to get $300 million in revenue. So it makes perfect sense for a nation to host the World Cup. I mean, for FIFA, it does. It's going to walk into your nation and make as much money as possible, leaving you oftentimes just crumbs. Plus, FIFA, as a nonprofit that it is, always demands for tax exemption once it hosts a World Cup. Basically, when FIFA comes in, stadiums and nearby areas suddenly become tax-free because it's FIFA. So in short, the host nation pays for everything and gets very, very little in return. Still, countries believe in the power of hosting a World Cup. So they do. They do whatever they can to win this bid. So FIFA has been hit with scandal after scandal over the last decade as whistleblowers have come out and just revealed the truth of what goes on. This real-life Hagrid is Chuck Blazer. For 2 decades, he worked with FIFA and racked up $29 million in credit card bills. He loves this lavish lifestyle that included having an apartment in Trump Tower just for his cats. So Blazer just rubbed shoulders with most prominent executives, but it turns out that he was also taking bribes to ensure World Cup bids for France and South Africa. And he, of course, was not the only one. This was a shitstorm of a corruption case. A bunch of other cases appeared. Jet Warner, for example, the head of CONCACAF, took in $10 million that were supposed to be used for developing football in the Caribbean and used $1.6 million of that money to pay for his personal loans. In 2011, a whistleblower revealed that Qatar had paid $1.5 million to FIFA executives and officials to ensure that the country would win this year's World Cup bid. And of course, these and other bunch of FIFA scandals rocked FIFA to the core, to the point in which Sepp Blatter, the president, had to resign in 2015. And he, of course, was no saint himself. His name is embedded in most of these accusations. And with FIFA, we come to this typical case with nonprofits, the massive salaries. Sepp Blatter had a salary of $3 million, would get this, a $12 million a year bonus. His replacement, Gianni Infantino, has a much more modest, they learned the lesson here, much more modest salary, just $1.5 million.
We will restore the image of FIFA and the respect of FIFA, and everyone in the world will applaud us, and will applaud all of you.
There's no wonder why people often compare FIFA to the mafia. Sure, it has grown the sport of soccer to unprecedented heights, but at the same time, it's become so powerful that you can't help but wonder if it will always be corrupt. Or what is their true motivation in the end? In fact, it's scary to think that these nonprofits have so much power. It almost makes me want to avoid them. Almost. And I say almost because it's really unfair to leave out the nonprofits that are really doing good work and doing great things. None of these are sponsored in any way. Foundations like the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, the Rotary International, the Environment Defense Fund, and the DN Fossey Gorilla Fund. These are just some of the hundreds of organizations that do, again, truly great work. And most importantly, they show how they spend their donations. So let's say that you want to work with a nonprofit, that's really great. If you want to be more involved, the best thing to do is just to ask and to do your research. All these organizations have to give you their financials. There are still a lot of sites that rate charities and that rate nonprofits. Just go online and check and make sure that the money that you're giving actually goes to that cause that you're supporting. I know that we trashed a lot of nonprofits in this video, but there is always room for positive action. In fact, if you know of any nonprofits that are doing great work, a good place to start is just to put them in the comments. I think that everybody will appreciate it. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Remember, the first 5 comments on any of our videos get access to our free office hours, so make sure that you're subscribed. More office hours are available with the link in the description. Hit the bell button, and we'll see you next week.